If you've noticed your hair thinning after 60 and you assumed it was simply too late to do anything about it, there's something happening in laboratories right now that might surprise you. It's not a miracle cream, it's not a supplement sold on late-night television. It's something much smaller and much more interesting. Scientists have spent the last several years mapping the exact genes and cells that decide whether a hair follicle wakes up or stays asleep forever. And what they're learning is starting to change the conversation around hair loss, not with promises, but with a much deeper understanding of what's actually happening under your scalp. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll understand your own hair in a way most people never do. Let's start with something almost every older adult notices at some point. A part that looks a little wider than it used to. A ponytail that feels thinner in your hand. A hairline that has quietly shifted, so slowly you almost didn't notice. Most people brush it off. It's just age, they think. Nothing to be done. And here's why that assumption sticks around. Hair thinning happens gradually. There's no single dramatic moment, no alarm bell, just years of small changes that eventually add up to something visible in the mirror. Because it happens so slowly, most people never ask why it's happening. They just accept it. But there's a reason it happens. And that reason has a lot more to do with biology than most of us were ever taught. Here's something that might be new information. You are not born with a fixed, permanent set of hairs that simply fall out one by one until you're bald. Instead, every hair on your head is part of a cycle. It grows for a while, it rests for a while, it falls out, and, under the right conditions, a brand new hair is supposed to grow right back in its place. This cycle repeats itself thousands of times over a lifetime. As we get older, something changes. For some people, especially those with a genetic tendency toward pattern hair loss, the resting phase gets longer and longer, and the growing phase gets shorter and shorter. Eventually, some follicles simply stop restarting the cycle altogether. The follicle isn't gone, it's just asleep. That distinction matters enormously, and we'll come back to it. Let's talk about what this actually looks like in real life, because not every kind of hair change is the same, and not every case means something serious. Sign 1. Gradual thinning at the crown or temples. This is the classic pattern many people associate with aging, and in most cases it reflects the natural hair growth cycle slowing down over time, often influenced by genetics and hormones. It usually isn't something to panic about, but it's worth mentioning at a routine checkup, especially if it's new or accelerating. Sign 2. Sudden, patchy hair loss. This is different from gradual thinning. If hair falls out in noticeable clumps or coin-sized patches over a short period, that's a pattern worth discussing with a healthcare provider sooner rather than later, since it can sometimes be linked to stress, thyroid changes, nutritional issues, or other treatable causes. Sign 3. Hair that seems finer and more fragile than before. Many older adults notice their hair isn't just thinner in quantity. The individual strands feel weaker. This can be a normal part of the aging hair cycle, but it can also reflect factors like hydration, protein intake, or certain medications, which we'll get into shortly. Sign 4. Hair loss paired with other symptoms. If thinning hair shows up alongside fatigue, unexplained weight changes, or changes in skin or nails, that combination is worth mentioning to a doctor, since it may point to something outside the hair follicle itself, like a thyroid or nutritional issue, that's easier to address than people expect. None of these signs, on their own, point to one specific diagnosis, but together they're useful clues, and that's the mindset worth adopting. Not fear, but attentiveness. Here's the detail most people never hear about. Hair loss isn't really about hair. It's about the follicle underneath the skin, a tiny structure most of us never think about that acts almost like a small factory with its own on and off switch. And here's where things get interesting. For a long time, scientists believed that once a follicle stopped producing hair, it was essentially finished, dormant for good. But that's not the whole story. Researchers studying the biology of hair follicles have found that many inactive follicles are still alive. They're just waiting for the right biological signal to start the growth cycle again. The follicle didn't die. It went quiet. That single idea is at the center of a lot of the research making headlines lately. So what actually controls whether a follicle is active or quiet? This is where genetics comes in. And don't worry, we're going to keep this simple. Think of a hair follicle like a small, self-contained construction site. To build a new hair, the site needs several different crews working together at the base of the follicle, in a structure called the dermal papilla. One crew, call them the architects, sends out chemical signals that say, it's time to build. Scientists often refer to this signaling system using the term WNT, one of the best-studied pathways in hair biology. When this signal is strong, the follicle is far more likely to start a new growth cycle. Another crew, the builders, are stem cells that live in a small reservoir near the follicle, waiting to be activated. When the signal from the architects reaches them, they start dividing and forming the structures that eventually become a visible hair. For years, scientists assumed that was the whole crew, but newer research, including laboratory work published in the last couple of years, has pointed to a third group of supporting cells that appear necessary for a follicle to fully mature and produce a durable, functioning hair, not just a partial structure that stalls out early. In other words, hair growth may depend on a more complex teamwork between cell types than scientists previously understood. That's a meaningful shift, because it means the future of hair science isn't about one single gene or one single pill. It's about understanding an entire communication system inside your skin. Genetics determines how sensitive your particular follicles are to these signals, including your sensitivity to hormones like DHT, a byproduct of testosterone that's long been linked to pattern hair loss in people with a genetic predisposition on both your mother's and father's side of the family. That's why hair loss so often runs in families. It's not one gene acting alone. It's an inherited pattern of sensitivity, spread across many genes, that adds up differently in every person. Genetics sets the stage, but daily life plays a real supporting role too. A few everyday factors that can influence how your hair looks and behaves. Sleep. Hair follicles, like most tissues in the body, do a lot of their repair work while you rest. Chronic poor sleep has been associated with disruptions in normal cell turnover throughout the body. Hydration and diet. Hair is made largely of protein, and follicles need a steady supply of nutrients, including iron, zinc, and adequate protein, to keep the growth cycle running smoothly. Significant, prolonged nutritional gaps can show up in hair health before they show up anywhere else. Stress. Extended periods of physical or emotional stress have been linked to a type of temporary hair shedding, where more hairs than usual shift into the resting phase at once. The good news is that this type is often reversible once the underlying stress eases. Medications. Certain medications, including some used for blood pressure, mood, and blood thinning, can affect hair growth as a side effect. This is never a reason to stop a prescribed medication on your own. It's simply useful information to bring up with your prescribing doctor if you're concerned. Sitting for long periods and reduced circulation, blood flow delivers oxygen and nutrients to the scalp, just like everywhere else in the body. Staying physically active supports circulation throughout your system, hair follicles included. None of these factors act alone. They layer on top of your genetic starting point, which is exactly why two people with similar genetics can still have noticeably different outcomes. So what does this mean in practical terms? Here's the encouraging part. You don't need to wait for a lab breakthrough to take sensible steps today. Gentle scalp massage has been studied as a simple way to support circulation to hair follicles, and it costs nothing but a few minutes. Eating a balanced diet with adequate protein, iron, and overall nutrition supports the raw materials your follicles need. Staying well hydrated and physically active supports circulation throughout the body, including the scalp. Protecting your hair from unnecessary damage, Harsh heat styling, tight hairstyles, and aggressive brushing reduces strain on follicles that are already working harder than they used to. And perhaps most importantly, keeping track of changes. Simple observations, like a photo of your hairline every few months, can help you and your doctor tell the difference between normal, gradual change and something that's moving faster than expected. None of this requires extreme diets, unproven supplements, or expensive routines. Slow and steady wins here. There are moments when hair changes deserve a conversation with a healthcare professional rather than a wait-and-see approach. If hair loss is sudden, rapid, or comes in distinct patches rather than a gradual overall thinning, it's worth getting evaluated. The same is true if hair loss appears alongside other new symptoms, unexplained fatigue, changes in weight, changes in your skin, or nail changes, because these combinations can sometimes point to a thyroid issue, a nutritional deficiency, or another underlying condition that's very treatable once identified. This isn't about creating alarm. Most hair thinning in older adults is a normal, gradual process tied to genetics and aging. But your doctor can help rule out or catch early the smaller number of cases where something more specific is going on. As always, this video is meant to be educational, not a substitute for an actual medical evaluation. Only a healthcare professional who knows your history can give you guidance specific to you. Let's clear up a few things people commonly get wrong. Myth: hair loss only comes from your mother's side of the family. Reality: genetic research has shown that hair loss patterns are influenced by genes inherited from both parents, not just one side. Myth: once a follicle stops producing hair, it's gone for good. Reality: as we discussed earlier, many follicles go dormant rather than disappearing entirely, which is exactly why so much current research is focused on reactivation rather than replacement. Myth: hair loss after 60 always means something is medically wrong. Reality: in most cases, it reflects a normal, genetically influenced slowdown of the hair cycle, not a hidden illness. Still, it's always reasonable to mention noticeable changes to your doctor just to be safe. If there's one mistake that comes up again and again, it's this: people either ignore hair changes completely, assuming nothing can be done, or they swing to the opposite extreme, chasing expensive, unproven products marketed with dramatic promises. Both approaches skip the same simple step: getting informed, and if something feels off, asking a professional. Understanding the biology, even at a basic level, tends to replace both denial and desperation with something far more useful: a clear, realistic sense of what's happening and what's actually worth doing about it. Let's bring this together. Hair thinning after 60 is common, and in most cases, it's tied to a genetically influenced slowdown of a lifelong growth cycle, not a sign that something is broken. The signs worth paying attention to are the ones that don't fit that gradual pattern: sudden patches, rapid changes, or hair loss paired with other new symptoms. The things you can reasonably do: good nutrition, hydration, sleep, gentle scalp care, and staying active, are the same fundamentals that support your overall health, not just your hair. And the moment to loop in a healthcare professional is any time the pattern changes quickly, or when hair loss shows up alongside other symptoms that concern you. Science is only just beginning to fully map the signals that tell a hair follicle when to grow and when to rest. That research may eventually lead to new options for the future, but you don't have to wait for a lab breakthrough to take care of yourself today. Pay attention to your body. Keep the basics in place: sleep, nutrition, movement, hydration, and when something changes in a way that concerns you, don't guess. Ask. That's not just good advice for your hair. It's good advice for aging well, in every sense of the word. Thanks for spending this time learning something new about your health today.